everyone to today's Open Group webinar, which today is about using Archimate to manage stakeholders. Presenter today is Joost Neerhoff, who's a consultant at Biz Design. Before I hand over to Joost, I'd just like to cover off a few housekeeping issues. We encourage you all to ask questions during this event. This is one of the main objectives of these webinars from the Open Group. The best way to submit a question is to use the QA text facility in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. When you do submit a question, I ask you to address it to all. That way everyone gets to see all the questions that are being asked. We'll handle all the questions at the end of the event. You'll also be interested to note that this event is being recorded. So if for any reason you have to leave the webinar early today, or if you have any technical problems, you will be able to listen and view the whole presentation in full from tomorrow, and you will all receive an email with a link to where you can access that recording. So housekeeping rules, I'd now like to hand over to Joost to start his presentation. Over to you, Joost.
Okay, thank you, Simon. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining today's webinar on using Archimate to stakeholders. My name is Joost Neerhoff. Well, let's see. I'm an A consultant at Biz Design. I'm also, next to my consulting job, I also am a trainer in Archimate, TOGAF, our design architect tool to make enterprise architectural models. Here's short stuff on me, how you can find me on email, where you can find me on Twitter, and where you can find Biz Design, although I see that our web address is probably done on every slide, so you will remember that one after this webinar. Today's schedule, I think we got 1 hour to cover several subjects. First, just start shortly on stakeholders and on using pictures to manage those stakeholders. Then short for those of you who are joining and who are familiar yet with Archimate. I will tell something short about Archimate. I'm not going to tell you everything, all the details. It's way too big, and there are other webinars from the group which will help you understand Archimate much better. But just so you get a feel of what Archimate is, everybody who already knows Archimate, well, this will be maybe a quick reminder for you then. Then I'm going to tell you something about views and concerns. They're also part from also incorporated into Archimate. Archimate does say something about viewpoints, views, and concerns. Then we're going to look at stakeholders, the classification system of viewpoints, which is used in Archimate. I'm going to show you a couple of slides with some examples of viewpoints in which you can address different concerns for different stakeholders, maybe some conclusions, and if there is some time left, I will also show some viewpoints which are mentioned in TOGAF 9. Well, I think most Open Group members who are interested in this webinar will probably also know something about TOGAF, but TOGAF also states viewpoint used during your architectural process, and I'll show you some examples on how Archimate you can make models which will fit into TOGAF viewpoints. So to Google, and you're going to Google on stakeholders, you will probably see these kind of pictures with circles I see, which states stakeholders, which what is stakeholder? Well, the problem with different stakeholders is that you have to try to convince your stakeholder. The stakeholders all do have different concerns, and it's very hard. Well, I personally find it very hard to convince different stakeholders with different opinions, with different concerns, with one view, with one model. So you should think about how to adapt different views for different needs for different stakeholders. For example, this an overview, which is a nice view for a enterprise architect, which you can see different conceptual, logical, physical layers of the of their EA. But if you go into more depth and you want to know a bit more, you might consider a like this, where we see that there is a central application with loads of applications interfacing with. Times, especially if you have stakeholders in the management, for example, other ways to convince those stakeholders. You don't need a model, but a formal model, but maybe more something like this, what they call a artistic impression, where you have like a charcoal draw of a solution. For example, this is also a artistic impression. This one is of a artistic impression of a new railway station in the Netherlands. But if you're talking to the technical guys in the organization, you probably will convince them with a artistic impression. You have to go into more depth on a specific layer. So you should maybe try to get some technical stuff in your view, like we've done over here. This could also be a view to convince stakeholders. Just some text, some draw on a paper. A total other way to address specific needs. Or a technical one with some kind of process on top. So try and convince all those stakeholders. You have a lot of challenges. The communication challenge. How to communicate all different views to these different stakeholders, and how to make consistent pictures, so that the next time when another subject is addressed, you use the same method to convince a specific stakeholder. What is the level of detail? I think that's personally quite a hard one to find the exact right level of detail. How do you make unambiguous pictures? How do you maintain and reuse the different views, the different models you have? If you thought about the message, try to look from the side to behave like the stakeholder. What do you think about a specific view you see then? What is the message of you? Or which views are appropriate for which stakeholders, for what purpose? In the end, it all comes down on communication. Just very short on enterprise architecture, TOGAF and Archimate, for those of you who are not familiar with it yet. Well, if you enterprise architecture, and you look to the definition of enterprise architecture, well, both and Archimate use this definition of architecture as a starting point. So an ISO standard 42010. So architecture is the structure of a system in terms of its components, the external visible properties, the relations between those components, and the underlying principles. Well, and if you go very short, because this is already quite long when you're on a birthday party and you have to tell people what enterprise architecture, you could say, well, it's about structure with a vision. Well, enterprise architecture, you could say, well, enterprise architecture is a discipline with the objective of steering changes. Some people say, well, enterprise architecture is a product, a design that shows the coherence between products, processes, organizations, information, and supply, infrastructure. All on that vision, your explicit starting points, the principles you use there, the preferences you have. Enterprise architecture is a process, a way of working aimed at the development and use of enterprise architecture within an enterprise. And it's about the peoples and the resources carrying out enterprise architecture. Within the open group, there's been a call for definitions on enterprise architecture. There are many possible definitions. I'm going to say now, well, this is the best definition. I think enterprise architecture is probably all three of them which are stated here. Just make sure if you talk about enterprise architecture with others to clear out what of EA you're talking about. Now, short on Archimate. Archimate is the open group standard for modeling and visualizing enterprise architecture. Archimate is a language for describing architectures, enterprise architectures. It covers three layers: the business layer, the application layer, and the technology layer. And it's mostly about the relationships between those different layers. It gives you a graphical language with formal semantics, and because it has a graphical language with those formal semantics, it enables analysis on EOLs and gives you some tool support. Then it's a language which is supported by quite a different tool nowadays. So Archimate gives you some techniques for visualization and analysis of those models focused at various stakeholders. Archimate is an open standard which is maintained by the open group. If you go to the website stated on the slide, opengroup.org/Archimate, you will find lots of more information on Archimate, and also the exact specification of the language can be found over there. Well, just to give you an impression, Archimate has three different layers. A business layer, well, here you can see some different concepts from the business layer. There are much more concepts in the business layer of Archimate, but I'm not going to talk too much about that. So on the application layer, to describe your application landscape and data objects in that application landscape. And a technology layer to describe your technology. And as you can see, there are columns in this model. The column represents what you could say information, while middle column is representing behavioral concepts, and the right column, the right one, are what they call the active structure. The components carry out the behavior. So that was just a short introduction on EA and on Archimate. On the viewpoints and views in Archimate. Well, and most of the time when building a view for a specific stakeholder, you should try to remember that less is more. If one of you have ever built your own house, you know you have all those different drawings of the house, all those different drawings which how the house has to be built. Depending on the stakeholder, the guy who is coming for foundation of the house, he's not interested in the things of, for example, the walls and the roof of the house. He needs to know the layout of the house and how strong that foundation has to be. While the guys, all the last minute work inside a house and make it nice, they need to know exactly how your house should look right. So they need total other drawings than just a map of the house. Archimate also use the term viewpoints and views, and they're also taken from that same ISO standard 42010, which that's a thing like what they call a concern, a viewpoint, a stakeholder. A viewpoint has a relation with a view, and with all stakeholder has a specific concern. Well, if you go to that standard, you can actually read how all these different subjects are related to each other. I think I did hide that slide. There's also a slide which gives you the exact formal meta model of how a viewpoint relates to a view, to a model, and a viewpoint relates to a concern and a stakeholder. The background argument is that you have like one EA model, one model for enterprise for your enterprise architecture. You can build different views for different stakeholders. So there's a typical way of working with these models views. So there's one architecture repository containing a large model or multiple interrelated models. And the users of the repository each own view on that model in the repository. So a view is just a selection of the content in the repository. Information may be visualized in different ways. For example, a table, as I showed here in the last one, where you have P1 and P2, an application, so that's process 1 and process 2, and application 1, 2, and 3. That's on the model, but maybe an app architect is just interested in this part of the EA model. An enterprise architect might be interested in this part of the model. Users might not be interested at all in these very formal argument models and might be more interested in the model shown on the right-hand side, which has a more informal notation. Well, I think important thing you should always think about when building a visualization for a specific stakeholder is what is the concern of the stakeholder. And you only start making specific views when you know the concern of the stakeholder. I'm not going to make views just for the sake of making those views. Then you also have to maintain all those different views while you're not maybe really addressing a specific stakeholder with a specific concern. So just make sure that you make those views just in time with just enough information to address the stakeholder's concern. Well, who are typical stakeholders for enterprise architecture? Upper level management, middle level management. End users might be interested in some parts, some results from your enterprise architecture. Other architects, enterprise architects, maybe application architects. A operational manager, a project manager, a system developer, a system administrator. Well, I see there's still some bullets left down. I think if we would come here and would start a brainstorm session, we can loads of new typical stakeholders for enterprise architecture. A stakeholder is solely just a role. A stakeholder is a specific person, and that person also might have some personal interests. So not only think about just on contents from your enterprise architecture is your stakeholder interested in, but also investigate that stakeholder in what is the best way to address this stakeholder in a presentation, or do you better with just a conversation? Are you going to use words or are you going to use pictures? Is this holder interested in some details, or is this stakeholder interested in overview? You're going to use formal argument models, UML diagrams, or could you address this stakeholder with a cartoon? You're going to use PowerPoint, Word, Excel, or some other tools to show something. But think about maybe the personal interests of that stakeholder. So if that stakeholder likes playing golf, basketball, football, that stakeholder is more into cars or bicycles, use that information to tell a story and to go through the models you've made, but then try to use that personal interest of the stakeholder as well, incorporate it in your story, and then try to find the stakeholder sweet spot, so you can really convince the stakeholder. A bit more the formal classification system within Archimate for those different viewpoints. Archimate, well, there are in general 3 types of viewpoints. There are designing viewpoints, there are viewpoints to support the deciding process, and there are viewpoints which help you inform people about the architecture. Well, the design viewpoints, typical roles, users of those designing viewpoints are architects, software developers, business process designers. Those are the people who are probably interested in those designing viewpoints. People decisions in organizations like product managers, CIOs, CEOs, maybe manager of a department, manager of a team. They are interested in viewpoints which help them make the right decision. So those deciding viewpoints, and the viewpoints informing are more like users, customers, employees working in the organizations, people who might have some interest in some parts of your enterprise architecture. What it also says is there are 3 different levels of detail which you can consider those 3 types of viewpoints. So you can have a very detailed viewpoint with lots of details on a specific subject, viewpoints where you focus more on coherence between specific parts of your enterprise architecture, or viewpoint where you present more like an overview of your enterprise architecture or parts of that enterprise architecture. Well, 3 different, from that upper part, those 3 different goals, here they are, the viewpoints for designing, deciding, and informing. Well, I think most of the things stated here I've already told you, so just so you can read it back afterwards. Same here on the level of detail. So where you have 3 different levels of detail, very detailed, more on coherence or more overview viewpoints. Those last ones are the most abstract, comprehensive views of which give you some multiple aspects of different layers. Most upper level managers or enterprise architects. In the background, you will see the Archimate framework with the 3 layers: business, application, and technology layer, and the 3 columns: the passive structure, so the information, behavior structure, and the active structure. And on this model, you can find well, the different aspects from an enterprise architecture model. So where the information structure can be found, well, mainly in the left column, while business processes are mostly focused in the business layer and then specifically in the behavioral part of the business layer. Well, and if you look at some design viewpoints, you could say, well, those design viewpoints focused on cooperation between different actors. Well, where can you find cooperation like viewpoints? Well, it's say in the framework, so you have behavioral objects from the layer, which shows business process corporation, or more actors, so the active structure in the business layer and a little bit in the application layer, so which actors are using which applications. But the application layer, how are different applications cooperating with each other? If you have a stakeholder which is more interested in usage of the different applications, you will probably will cover the up two layers from left to right. So you mostly have business concepts and application concepts in your view. If you want to know which products are supported by which processes, for example, or which applications, you're more focused on the passive behavioral components from the business layer. If you want more about relation, you call maybe some design viewpoints. How are we going to realize specific services? You're might probably be interested in business layer concepts from the behavioral part and some application concepts from the active structure part. While if you're more interested in, if your stakeholder is more interested in implementation and deployment of applications on your technical infrastructure, for example, you must consider using the concepts from the lower two levels, so the application and the technology layer. Another way to think about those different, there's a book, maybe some of you are already familiar with this book. It's from Dan Room. It's called The Back of the Napkin. It's a very one, and it gives you, for example, some different ways to look at an apple and see, well, there are quite ways to look at apple, depending on the interests of the holder. There's a thing which they call squid, and that's where they say, well, think about what you show and how it's simple in a qualitative way, how to visualize it in an individual way, and in a maybe more focusing on the change from going from specific moment to another moment in time, how a specific subject can change over time. And you can apply that to enterprise architecture as well. So think about all these different dimensions before you're going to create a view. What does the stakeholder need? Does this support his concern, or is this view only going to support your own concerns? Now I'm going to show you some examples of some different viewpoints and views. They're based on the Archimate language. Just for the ones who want to know, I've created these views with our own tool, which is called Business Design Architect. Example here, a design view, where you want to see something on the details of the view. Well, here we have assessment system, and we build up that view, and we show you how this assessment system is using 3 other systems. You could do that, for example, in an application structure view, which is a view which is defined by the Archimate language as well. And you could also, well, I want to know what is the behavior of that assessment system. Well, it realizes a assessment service, and then you have a application view, which shows you, well, how the application uses application, but also behavior it is performing. I'm more interested in those coherence views or those overview views, like a deployment view. Here you can see a infrastructure service which is used by the assessment system, but also the assessment system which is using other systems as well. Or more a total view, where we have different types of objects, where we have the assessment system in the middle, which reads the assessment service, but also different projects connected to this application, and also a architectural principle like product-dependent offering dialog connected to the system, to the assessment system. So this gives you like an overview of everything what is connected to that assessment system. Very interested in the assessment system, but then more in which fits into the different layers. So here you can see, well, this assessment system is realizing a assessment service, which then this service is used then by a business process from the business layer, from the process as claim. And you can see, well, that claim file service, which the assessment system is using, is realized by mainframe in the technical layer. View, where you could say just model some products, and here you see on the top two different products, and to realize those products, these products are using a specific application. You can see within that application also what the different functions are. We can see which data objects are accessed by the application, and you also see where the data is stored, in which this data is stored. There you have a coherence view, but then more for from a designing or an informing point of view, where you show how specific products depend on your application and technology structures. Well, a bit of more complex one, where you have more different technology structures down the green ones, more elaboration on education layer with different data objects, and on top you can see 4 different products which in that specific application. Also informing views, but then on coherence between those. For example, what you see here is a coloring on your view, where you have different applications, but with a color you show how these applications are related to different projects. As you can see here, for example, that the registration system and the customer administration system are both related to the renewal CRM systems project, and that is registration system and assessment system are both connected to the LA management project. So I think for a lot of people interested in how, if you're involved in project management, I think these are very interesting to see how different projects are affecting different parts of your enterprise architecture. Well, a project context diagram. I think a project context diagram is also one of the views from TOEF. The meaning of the colors. The green one, example in a view where you can show that the green one is a new server which has to be developed, has to be built, is new in architecture. The blue ones are modified